My name is Di Rui Eun from Section 1.
My name is Lim Jing Ying. I am from Section 1.
Hi, my name is Nisha, daughter of Subhasidan. I'm from Section 1.
Good morning, madam. My name is Lee Jaeun. I'm from Section 1.
Hi, my name is Muhammad Irfan bin Muhammad Farudin from Section 2.
The scenario that our group chosen are scenario 3, which say the Daniel, who has a history of mental illness, entered an electronics store during a period of confusion. He purchased several expensive gadgets and signed a credit agreement. Although Daniel signed the agreement himself, his caregiver later explained that he was not mentally stable at the time of the purchase. Despite this, the seller argued that the contract is still valid because Daniel signed it willingly. In this assignment, our group will identify, apply relevant legal application and analysis, and determine the situation of the scenario given.
In this case, the main issue is whether Daniel had the legal capacity to enter the contract at the time of purchase. Although Daniel willingly signed a credit agreement, he has a documented history of mental illness, entered electronics store alone during a period of confusion. The court need to determine whether Daniel was able to understand the nature and consequence of the contract before he signed the credit agreement. The second issue is whether the contract is valid, void, or voidable. In the situation that the person who has mental incapacity, the contract is not automatically void but may be voidable. Daniel may have the right to cancel the contract if it can prove that he was mentally incapable of understanding the agreement at the time of purchase. The third issue is whether the seller know or should have known about Daniel's mental incapacity. If Daniel showed confusion or unusual behavior during the transaction, the seller may not be able to fully enforce the contract. However, if Daniel appeared normal and understood the purchasing process, the seller could argue that the agreement was made fairly and in good faith. The issue is important because the seller's awareness of Daniel's condition may affect the validity of the contract. The last issue is whether Daniel must pay for the gadgets or return to the electronics store. If the seller may be required to cancel the credit agreement, Daniel needs to return the electronic gadget and the seller needs to refund payment to Daniel. The court may consider that whether the item purchased were necessity, although expensive electronic gadget generally not considered essential good.
For this scenario, we know there are several relevant legal cases and applications. So the relevant legal principles relating to this scenario are found under the Contract Act 1950, particularly Section 11 and 12, which deal with competency and soundness of mind. Under the Contract Act 1915, Section 11 defines the competence of an individual to make a contract as an individual who attains majority, possesses soundness of mind, and is not disqualified by any law to make a contract. According to the age of majority age, 1971, Section 2 of Malaysia define an individual who attains majority at the age of 18 years. Apart from the attainment of a legal age, an individual needs to have the capacity of the mind to comprehend the contract entered into. Thus, any individual who cannot think or comprehend the terms of agreement due to sickness will lead to the unenforceability of the contract.
Under Section 12.1, a person must be able to understand the contract and make a rational judgment about its effect before entering into a valid agreement. This scenario, Daniel's mental capacity at the time of signing is questionable because he was reportedly experienced a period of confusion. As a result, he may not have fully understood the term of the contract or the financial obligations arising from the credit agreement. Furthermore, Section 12.2 of the Contract Act 1950 states that a person who usually of unsound mind can only enter into a valid contract during period when they are mentally sound. Therefore, if Daniel can provide medical record, doctor's report, or other evidence showing that he was mentally unstable at the time of the purchase, he may argue that the contract should not be legally binding on him. Another important issue is whether the seller knows about Daniel's mental condition. If Daniel shows signs of confusion, unusual behavior, or had difficulty understanding the transaction, the seller should have taken extra care before proceeding with the sale. In such circumstance, the country may conclude that the seller ought to have been aware of Daniel's inability to fully understand the agreement and its consequences.
In this situation, there are few business solutions that seller can do. So first of all, seller should take care when dealing with customers who may not fully understand a contract. Before asking customer to sign in a credit agreement, they should explain the term clearly and using simple language. This helps customer to understand the payment and responsibility they have. In this situation, there are few business solutions that seller can do. So first of all, seller should take extra care when dealing with customer who may not fully understand a contract. Before asking customer to sign in a credit agreement, they should explain the term clearly and using simple in language. This helps customer to understand the payment and responsibility involved. So besides that, the seller should also train their workers to notice signs of confusion and unusual behavior. If a customer seems confused or mentally unstable, the seller should stop the transaction and ask for help. So for expensive purchase, businesses can create safer procedures such as checking the customer understanding before approving the agreement. Company may also give customer a short period to cancel the contract if they change their mind after signing. So as a conclusion, the seller must make sure that the customer is understanding and in good condition while signing the agreement. This step can help them to avoid legal problems and create fair business transactions.
In conclusion, the validity of the contract between Daniel and the electronics store depends on whether Daniel had the mental capacity to understand the nature and consequences of the agreement at the time it was made. Under the Section 11 and 12 of Contract Act 1950, a person must be of sound mind and capable of making rational judgment before entering into legally binding contract. Since Daniel had a historical of mental illness and was reportedly experiencing a period of confusion when he purchased expensive electronic gadget and signed the credit agreement, there is possibility he lacked the requirement capacity of contract. The court will consider evidence such as medical record, witness statement, and Daniel's behavior during the transaction to determine whether he understood the agreement. The court also will examine whether the seller knew or should reasonably known about Daniel's mental condition. If it proven that Daniel was mentally incapable of understanding the contract, the agreement may be declared voidable and may be set aside, as the item purchased were expensive electronic gadgets rather than necessities. The seller may have limited right to enforce the contract. Overall, this case highlights the importance of ensuring that all parties entering into contract possess the legal capacity to do so. It also demonstrates the need for business to act responsibly when dealing with vulnerable consumer by taking reasonable steps to confirm that customer is fully understanding the term and condition of the contract. By adopting appropriate safeguard and ethical business practices, both consumer and business can be protected from legal dispute and unfair contractual outcome.